Hollywood was left reeling when Tom Cruise, arguably the largest action star on Earth, was physically removed from the set of Jimmy Kimmel Live. What was supposed to be a standard promotional appearance became an explosive showdown that revealed a side of the late-night host that millions had suspected but never seen so brazenly. In a stunning demonstration of arrogance, Kimmel repeatedly goaded his A-list guest until the situation came to a head in chaos. Industry insiders are now spilling the behind-the-scenes tension and stunning power play that resulted in security escorting Cruise from the set. If you thought you knew Jimmy Kimmel, think again. Be sure to subscribe and let us know what you think in the comments, because this story shows us the real man behind the image of late night's most polarizing host. According to sources close to the production, tension had been building well before cameras began rolling. Cruise reported to the studio in good spirits, eager to talk about his latest blockbuster project. The production team characterized him as gracious and professional in pre-show preparations, taking time to greet crew members and thanking everyone for fitting him in around his busy schedule. But the mood rapidly changed once Kimmel showed up on set mere minutes before cameras rolled. Jimmy seemed off from the minute he arrived, said one production assistant who refused to be named. He barely said hello to Tom during their short pre-show meeting and was griping to staff about having to reschedule the show's lineup to fit him in. This chilly reception was only the start of what would become an increasingly uncomfortable experience. As the show got underway, viewers sensed something was off almost right away. Kimmel's introduction of Cruise lacked his typical enthusiasm, instead coming across as perfunctory and slightly condescending. When Cruise burst onto the stage with his typical energy and charisma, the contrast between the two men was stark. While the audience erupted in applause, Kimmel hardly stood for the usual handshake. The interview began innocently enough with run-of-the-mill questions about Cruise's latest film, but astute viewers sensed an undertone of tension. Kimmel's questions seemed intended to provoke rather than promote, focusing less on the movie and more on trying to get personal information out of his guest. When Cruise demurred and redirected the conversation back to his project, Kimmel's expression noticeably darkened. "You can always tell when Jimmy is getting angry," said another show insider. "He has this way of smiling that doesn't reach his eyes, and he started doing that about 5 minutes into the segment." The turning point came when Kimmel suddenly changed the subject, bringing up a controversial Hollywood figure that Cruise had once refused to discuss in interviews. "So what do you think about all these charges against your old buddy?" Kimmel asked with a grin, referring to someone Cruise had collaborated with early in his career, but had distanced himself from after multiple scandals. Cruise's unease was apparent immediately. He shifted uncomfortably in his seat and replied tactfully, "I think tonight we're here to discuss the movie, which took hundreds of hardworking professionals years to make. I'd prefer to talk about their amazing work, rather than taking the cue." Kimmel doubled down. "Come on, Tom. Everyone knows you two were buddies. You can't just act like that. Relationship never existed. The crowd wants to know what you think." He pressed, pointing towards the crowd, who fell into an awkward silence. The tension in the studio grew palpable. Cruise, still composed, replied, "I understand you have a show to host, Jimmy, but I believe in being respectful of people's privacy, including my own. Some things are off limits for good reason." Kimmel, clearly annoyed by Cruise's refusal to take the bait, then made a snide remark about actors who choose to keep certain aspects of their lives private while profiting from everything else. The implication was clear, and it hit a nerve with Cruise, who has famously protected certain aspects of his private life despite his vast public profile. This is when the exchange began to heat up considerably. Cruise leaned forward in his chair, his trademark smile momentarily absent. "I've been in this business for 4 decades. Jimmy, I've always been upfront about the work I put into my films and the respect I have for the audiences who see them. That's what I'm here to discuss tonight." Kimmel, sensing he had finally gotten under Cruise's skin, went for the jugular. "That's rich coming from someone who peddles Scientology while lecturing others on honesty." He growled just loudly enough for the microphones to catch. The crowd gasped. This surprise attack on Cruise's religious beliefs crossed a line that few interviewers would dare approach, particularly in what was intended to be a light-hearted talk show appearance. The producer of the show could be seen frantically signaling from offstage, presumably attempting to get Kimmel back on track, or cut to commercial. Cruise's response was measured but firm. I respect everyone's right to their beliefs, Jimmy. I would expect the same courtesy from a professional host. His voice remained firm, but those seated in the front row could see his knuckles whitening as he clutched the armrests of his chair. Instead of diffusing the tension, Kimmel seemed energized by having gotten a rise out of someone. With a dismissive wave of his hand, he said, "Oh, please spare us the lecture on professionalism. We all know that's just." During the next commercial break, witnesses said they saw a heated exchange between Cruise and his publicist, while Kimmel conferred with the show's executive producer. When the cameras began rolling again, the tension had obviously ratcheted up. Kimmel, instead of moving on to safer ground, immediately continued his combative line of questioning. "Let's discuss your control issues." Tom Kimmel sneered. "People who have worked with you say you micromanage every aspect of the set. Your co-stars' directors even talk show hosts." Apparently Cruise held his ground. However, a muscle visibly contracted in his jaw. "I'm passionate about filmmaking, Jimmy. When people pay money to see a Tom Cruise film, they expect a certain level of quality and commitment. I owe them that commitment," Kimmel repeated sardonically. Interesting choice of words from someone who bounces from one project to another, leaving havoc in his wake. The audience started shifting uncomfortably. This wasn't the light banter they'd anticipated. It was becoming increasingly apparent that Kimmel had some kind of personal grudge against his guest. "I've been blessed to work with some of the most talented people in the business," Cruise replied calmly. "Directors like Spielberg, Scorsese, and Nolan. I learn from every experience. That's not havoc, that's growth." A smattering of applause broke out, which seemed to irritate Kimmel. "Sure, but let's be honest here. Your reputation in Hollywood isn't exactly spotless. There are stories, everyone has stories told about them in this business," Cruise interjected. "Not all of them are true." "So you're saying those crew members who talked about your explosive temper tantrums were lying?" Kimmel pressed, leaning forward aggressively. Cruise's famous smile had completely vanished. "Now I think there's a difference between demanding excellence and having temper tantrums. I respect every person who works on my films. Anyone who's actually worked with me knows that." "That's not what I heard," Kimmel muttered, just loudly enough for the microphones to pick up. The studio had grown so silent, you could hear the air conditioning humming. Instead of elaborating, Kimmel changed tactics. "Let's talk about your last movie. The reviews were, well, let's just say they weren't what you're used to." Kimmel began pulling up selected negative reviews of Cruise's latest film on cards he produced from under his desk, reading them aloud with obvious relish. "A vanity project that proves even the biggest stars fade eventually." Kimmel read, looking up with mock sympathy. "Ouch. That one's from the Times." The audience was dead silent. Even Kimmel's most devoted fans could see this had gone beyond entertainment into something mean-spirited. After reading several scathing reviews, Cruise finally spoke. "You know what I find interesting, Jimmy? I've been doing this for over 4 decades. I've had critics praise me and critics tear me apart. What I've never done is mock someone else's creative efforts just to get a cheap laugh." The subtle rebuke hung in the air. A few audience members actually applauded, which seemed to further agitate Kimmel. "Oh, I'm sorry," Kimmel said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "I forgot we're all supposed to pretend your movies are flawless because you're Tom Cruise." "No one's asking for that," Cruise replied. "But I am asking for basic professional courtesy, the same courtesy I've always shown you when I've come on this show." "Professional courtesy," Kimmel's voice rose. "Is that what you call it? When your team sends over a 3-page list of forbidden topics before you'll deign to appear on my show?" This accusation seemed to genuinely surprise Cruise. "I've never personally sent any list of demands to your show. My team coordinates with your producers to ensure we deliver an entertaining segment for your audience. That's standard practice." "Standard practice?" Kimmel scoffed. "Nothing about you is standard, Tom. You and your entourage sweep in here, making demands like you own the place. Do you have any idea how exhausting it is dealing with celebrities who think the world revolves around them?" Cruise remained remarkably composed. "I'm sorry you feel that way. I've always tried to be respectful of your show and your audience. If there have been misunderstandings between our teams, I'm happy to address that offline." "Oh, now you want to take it offline," Kimmel said with a harsh laugh. "Classic. Always controlling the narrative. The show's director was frantically signaling to Kimmel to wrap up the segment, but the host stubbornly ignored all cues. Let me tell you something about control. Tom Kimmel continued, color rising in his face. I've been doing this show for years. I've interviewed presidents, world leaders, and yes, plenty of movie stars, and I've never had anyone try to dictate terms to me the way you and your people do. Cruz's expression hardened. I came here tonight to talk about a film that hundreds of dedicated professionals poured their hearts into. If you're not interested in discussing that, perhaps we should end this conversation. Oh, I'm interested in plenty of things. Kimmel shot back. Like why you think you can come on my show and expect me to just ask the questions your publicist approved? This isn't a press junket, Tom. This is late-night television. We keep it real here. Keeping it real? Cruz raised an eyebrow. Is that what you call ambushing guests with topics? You know, they're not here to discuss. I call it journalism, Kimmel retorted at this. Cruz actually laughed, though there was no humor in it. With all due respect, Jimmy, what you're doing right now isn't journalism. It's not even good entertainment. It's just sad. For a moment, Kimmel seemed genuinely taken aback. The host's face flushed deeper red, but before the producer could intervene, Kimmel recovered and launched his most personal attack. Yet, you want to talk about sad Tom? Let's talk about how your personal life has become a punchline in Hollywood. Let's talk about how people whisper about you at parties. Let's talk about how your own daughter. That's enough. Cruz's voice cut through the studio like a whip crack. For the first time, real anger flashed across his face as he stood up from his chair. I've respected your show and your audience by coming here tonight. I've tolerated your unprofessional behavior out of that same respect. But I will not sit here while you try to boost your failing ratings by attacking my family. The studio fell completely silent. Even Kimmel seemed momentarily stunned by the sudden shift in dynamics as the carefully choreographed talk show dissolved into genuine conflict. After a few seconds of tense silence, Kimmel attempted to regain control with forced laughter. Come on, Tom. You can't expect to come on a comedy show and not have a few jokes at your expense. That's how this works. No, Jimmy, that's not how this works, Cruz replied, still standing. There's a difference between good-natured ribbing and what you're doing. You crossed a line and you know it. The show's executive producer stepped onto the stage, clearly attempting to manage the situation. He whispered something urgently to Kimmel, who waved him off dismissively. Oh, please, Kimmel said, rolling his eyes theatrically. The great Tom Cruise is too sensitive for a little late-night banter. This is exactly what I'm talking about. You Hollywood types live in a bubble where everyone kisses your ass all day long. Then someone like me comes along and tells it like it is, and suddenly I'm the bad guy. Several audience members actually booed at this surprising Kimmel, who glanced out at them with momentary confusion before doubling down. Jimmy, the executive producer, interrupted loudly. We need to go to commercial. No, I'm not finished. Kimmel insisted, visibly agitated. Now, Jimmy, the producer said firmly, making a cutting motion to the camera operators. As the cameras began to pull back, Cruz calmly turned to leave the stage. This seemed to trigger something in Kimmel, who suddenly stood up, running away. Tom Kimmel called after him. Is that what you do when you can't control the situation? Cruz paused and turned back slowly. I'm not running, Jimmy. I'm choosing to walk away from a conversation that's no longer productive or respectful. There's a difference. Cruz's tone was even, but there was an unmistakable edge to it. And just for the record, I've never needed to control conversations. My work speaks for itself. Your work. Kimmel laughed harshly. You mean jumping on couches and hanging off buildings? That's not acting, Tom? That's just a middle-aged man desperate to stay relevant. A collective gasp went through the studio. Even the band members looked shocked at the host's unprovoked viciousness. Cruz's expression hardened, but before he could respond, someone from his team rushed onto the stage and whispered something in his ear. Cruz nodded and then looked directly at Kimmel. I think we're done here. Thank you for having me on your show. Jimmy, I wish I could say it's been a pleasure. As Cruz turned to leave, Kimmel called out, Yeah, walk away. That's what you do best, isn't it? Walk away when things get complicated. Just ask your ex-wives. The producer physically inserted himself between Kimmel and Cruz. wildly gesturing for the cameras to cut to commercial, but it was too late. Cruz had come to a dead stop. The studio audience was silent as a tomb. Slowly, Cruz turned to face Kimmel. When he spoke, his voice was low but audible to every corner of the silent studio. "You know, Jimmy, I came here tonight out of respect for your audience and this show's tradition. I've been on your show many times over the years, always bringing my agami, always playing along with your bits and segments. I've treated you and your staff with nothing but professionalism." Cruz took a step towards Kimmel, who suddenly seemed less confident than he had moments before. But tonight, Cruz went on, "You've shown a side of yourself that I think will surprise a lot of your viewers. Not me, though. I've heard the stories from other guests. How you're friendly on camera, but a completely different person once. The lights go down, how you belittle your staff and throw tantrums when you don't get your way." Murmurs ran through the audience. Kimmel's face had grown increasingly pale as Cruz spoke. "I've ignored those rumors because I try to give everyone the benefit of the doubt," Cruz said. "But tonight you've shown everyone exactly who you are, and it's not a good look, Jimmy." For once, Kimmel seemed at a loss for words. The producer was wildly gesturing, and finally the network cut to commercial, but not before the cameras caught Kimmel's stricken face and Cruz's dignified exit from the stage. When the show came back on, Kimmel was alone at his desk, his demeanor noticeably subdued. He tried to make light of what had happened, but the joke fell flat. The audience's applause was scattered and unenthusiastic. Behind the scenes, chaos had erupted. According to staff members who later spoke to entertainment reporters, Cruz and his team were confronted by Kimmel's security as they tried to leave the building. "You need to wait here," one security guard reportedly told Cruz's publicist. "Jimmy wants to resolve this privately." "There's nothing to resolve," Cruz replied, stepping forward. "We're leaving now. Please step aside." When the security guards did not move, witnesses described a tense standoff in the backstage corridor. Cruz, despite being shorter than the security personnel, somehow managed to project an aura of absolute authority. "I said we're leaving," Cruz repeated, his voice low but commanding. "Unless you intend to physically restrain us, which I strongly advise against, you will step aside now." The head of security looked uncertainly at the producer who had tagged along backstage. After a moment's pause, the producer nodded, and the security team hesitantly parted. As they approached the exit, Kimmel himself materialized, having slipped away during commercial break. His face was flushed, his tie loosened. "Tom, wait," he shouted. "Look, things got heated out there. Let's discuss this in private." Cruz stopped, looking at Kimmel with a firm gaze. "I believe enough has been said tonight, don't you?" "Come on, man," Kimmel said, his voice now conciliatory. "It's television. You know how it is. We push buttons, get reactions. The audience loves it." "No, Jimmy. That's where you're wrong." Cruz said, "The audience doesn't love watching people humiliated. They don't love mean-spirited attacks disguised as humor. What happened out there tonight wasn't entertainment, it was bullying, plain and simple." Kimmel's expression grew darker. "Bullying? Are you kidding me? You're Tom Cruise. You're one of the most powerful men in Hollywood. Don't act like you're some victim here." "Power isn't the problem," Cruz responded evenly. "Respect is, and you demonstrated tonight that you don't possess any, not for your guests, not for your audience, and seemingly not for yourself." With those parting words lingering in the room, Cruz turned and headed for the door, his team following after him. Kimmel stood stunned, mouth agape, as if to offer a response that never materialized. The security detail, maybe realizing in which direction the wind was blowing, moved aside without further ado. As Cruz approached the door, one of the production assistants, a young woman who had watched the entire episode unfold with wide eyes, stepped forward tentatively. "Mr. Cruz," she said softly, "I just wanted to compliment you on defending yourself. Not many people do that here." Cruz paused, his expression relaxing as he gazed at her. "Sometimes you need to draw a line," he stated matter-of-factly, "even when it's hard." Then with a nod to his crew, he pushed through the exit doors and vanished into the night. The following morning, clips of the confrontation swept social media, clocking up millions of views within hours, Sheridan Kimmel Exposed became the #1 trending hashtag as viewers analyzed every second of the awkward exchange. Industry insiders who had kept their mouths shut for years started posting their own anecdotes about Kimmel's off-camera behavior, painting a picture that validated much of what Cruz had hinted at on air. The network executives convened an emergency meeting. By midday, they had issued a terse statement saying that Jimmy Kimmel Live would be taking an unscheduled 2-week break to enable studio maintenance crews. Meanwhile, kept up his trademark professionalism, turning down all requests for follow-up interviews or comment on the incident. His publicist released only a short statement. Mr. Cruz is grateful for the support he has received from fans, but considers the issue closed and is concentrating on his future projects. Nevertheless, the effect was undeniable. Ratings for Kimmel's show dropped through the floor. On its return, publicists grew hesitant to book their A-list clients on his show. And in Hollywood circles, a new phrase entered the lexicon, getting cruised, meaning to uphold one's dignity in the face of provocation and to resist bullying with calm authority. As for Kimmel, the mask had slipped, and no amount of damage control could completely recover the carefully constructed image he had built over the years. The public had caught a glimpse of the man behind the mask, and they weren't impressed by what they saw. In the end, the confrontation acted as a powerful reminder that even in an industry founded on illusion, authenticity sooner or later prevails, and that real star power isn't determined by one's capacity to lord it over others, but by the courage to fight for what is right. What do you think of this explosive showdown between Tom Cruise and Jimmy Kimmel? Was Kimmel out of line? Or was Cruise overreacting? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more inside gossip on your favorite celebrities. Hit that notification bell so you never miss an upload, and we'll catch you in the next video.